Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. All right. So it's a small group. It's a little loud. It's a small group. So what we'll try to do is take time. I'll share a little bit about what we do here at Sanofi in terms of thinking about value, and then save a good chunk of time to talk about, have a bit of a discussion and Q&A around questions that the group might have. So nice to meet everybody. My name is Shahir. My role at Sanofi is Head of Portfolio and Governance for digital globally. So I'm responsible for overseeing how we invest our money in all of our additional initiatives across all parts of Sanofi. So research and development, M&S, which is our manufacturing and sites, and then all the way to commercial. And then, of course, looking at the business operations and back office. When we think about AI and data, what I'll share with you today is sort of how we think about AI, the different types of AI, how we quantify the value, and give you kind of a few flavors about some of the use cases that we look at and how we evaluate them. And then we'll have a bit of a discussion about some of the best practices around it. So how many people here know or have heard of Sanofi? Okay, so quite a bit of people. So Sanofi is a global biopharma company. We have a global operations. In Canada, we actually have a significant presence. So we have a site up on Steeles, which is a vaccines manufacturing site that's quite major. And then in addition to that, we have an AI COE downtown. And really our mission is to chase the miracles of science and improve people's lives. So that's what we're after. And when we think about AI and data, it's really about how we can shorten the time to go from like a molecule or from the lab or the research side all the way until it's a molecule that, or a drug that patients can have. And so for us, really, speed is the most important element of our transformation. How do we bring down the speed? On average today, it takes 8 to 12 years to go from molecule all the way to patient. And we believe that with AI and Gen AI, we can bring that down to, call it 5 to 8 years. So when we think about AI at Sanofi, we kind of break it down into 3 categories. The first one is expert AI, so you can think of that as your traditional AI, so be it like machine learning or very specific AI models that have a specific purpose. So when it comes to research, for example, there's a lot of work around how we can do experiments, in silico experiments, in the computer before it ever even goes into an animal or a human, of course. And that allows us to accelerate the development or the research process, as an example. So that would be an example of an expert AI. The second type of AI that we think about is what we call snackable AI. So that's really AI that we give to everybody and put it in their hands. So for example, we have one of our key use cases is something we call Play. It's essentially a dashboard or a tool that every single leader at Sanofi uses. Every day they can see their sales, they can see where their sales are projected, any AI recommendations, and then they can use that to make decisions during their day. And then the last type of AI is Gen AI, and as I'm sure you've heard about it all day, the last 2 days, agentic AI is sort of the next evolution of that. So that's the third category. And then beneath all of that, we have our RAISE, which is our responsible AI framework that allows us to manage all of this and approach it in a transferable way. So you may have seen this from Jurassic Park, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could when they should have stopped to think about if they should. So the point of this is to really take a minute to think about with all these use cases, what are the right ones you should go after? And also, depending on the context, what might make sense to go after first. Today might look different because the unit costs of some of this technology is changing so fast. So if you rewind 2 years ago and you look at some of the Gen AI use cases and the cost of LLMs, it's so cost prohibitive to do a whole bunch of use cases. If you look fast forward to where we are today, the costs have gone down so much that you can basically do all of these use cases, and they are a lot more, from an ROI perspective, they make a lot more sense than they did a year ago. So something to keep in mind as you think about value. One of the other perspectives that we've also changed is, when we first started our Gen AI program, as an example, we used to take a very hard look on the ROI numbers. We wanted to see hard numbers. We wanted to go for, significant business cases. But as the costs, like I said, the unit costs go down, we actually started to shift our focus to be the hurdle rate being a lot lower, and we're actually going after use cases where they're more sticky, where we know if we give it to people, they're going to be continuing to use it and they're going to increase adoption, because we believe those things are going to be driving our cycle time improvements, which is the most important metric for us, bringing that time down from, like I said, 11 to 15 years down to 5 to 8. So when you're making a decision, especially with some of these new technologies, don't get so focused on just the pure dollars of it. Think about the adoption, because if you can scale it really quickly, you're more likely to be able to actually get some of that improvement that you're looking for. So taking a balanced approach is quite important. So I'll share a little bit about how we think about value when it comes to Sanofi. Like I said, for us, it's quite balanced. We have to focus on, of course, revenue and cost, but more importantly, and what affects our value even more importantly, is how quickly we can get our medicines to patients, and also improving the chances of those medicines working or becoming more effective. So we have something else called probability of success. Those 4 metrics are the key metrics that we care about. All our evaluations when it comes to our investments are looked at against those 4 capabilities. And depending on where you are in the value chain, if you're maybe in commercial or if you are in R&D, there's going to be a different focus. If you're in R&D, probability of success and time or process transformation are going to be the most critical. Almost every project that gets funded will be focused on these items. If you are in commercial, pretty much, revenue is going to be an expectation that every project should be driving that. And that's how we look at it. We try to keep it simple and try to not have too many metrics. So by default, within each of these, we have maybe 2 to 5 metrics that we focus on maximum. We try to have some custom metrics that are available if people choose, but really try to boil it up to those few metrics per category. So despite revenue and cost being the main components from a financial perspective, we also do look at probability of success and time as ways that also can have a financial impact. So like I said, when you think about pharma, it's a very long cycle. And so if you are starting to invest in a molecule, as an example, you are basically investing from a research and development perspective. You're going through clinical trials, which are quite expensive, and then only after X number of years of that development will you start seeing revenues. So for us, when we think about timing, it's really about shifting the curve forward. So if we can cut that period of time up front, all of the benefits of launching a medicine can actually move forward. So for us, if we know we can cut the cycle time, it means it's going to translate into an impact on our value, and we also quantify that to just make sure that if we need to prioritize, we pick the projects that are going to have the biggest impact on our portfolio. And from there, you could actually pick maybe certain projects in certain phases will have the biggest impact, and if you tackle those ones and prioritize those, then you're going to create more value. The other element, so going back going back, we had one more called process transformation, which is, or probability of success. So you can think of when you're doing clinical trials or even research, you're running experiments, and every experiment has a chance to pass or fail. And as you do more development, you are basically proving the efficacy of the drug. And so you're increasing the chance of the drug being as effective as possible, as safe as possible, and more likely to actually be launched and be approved. And so throughout the phase of each of these clinical trials, we measure what we call probability of success of that clinical trial. Typically, if you are in early stages, you have much higher chance of failing. That's part of the risk or the R&D investment profile. You have more risk up front. And as you go closer, you've done a lot more testing, and so you have a lower chance of failing. But of course, there's still a chance. And so when we think about value, how do we make sure that at every one of each of these steps, we improve the chances of succeeding, right? So I'll give you a couple of examples. One of the things that we would evaluate from a business case perspective is if we have, let's say, a solution or an AI solution that allows us to diversify the number of leads that we're looking at. That's going to improve the chances of success in early stages, which means that the overall probability of success goes up, which means should this molecule end up going to market, will be more successful, it'll create value. So again, that's another way we translate that. We look at the probabilities multiplied by what the value of that molecule would be if it was launched, and if a solution improves the chances, then it increases the... Yeah, it would be like a drug before it's launched.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for clarifying. Okay, so putting it all together for us, really, it's about revenue and costs, which should basically be applicable in every business. And then if you are in the R&D space, then you probably have other metrics like probability of success for us, and time. Depending on your business, maybe those last two metrics that are non-financial might look a little bit different. If you're in tech, maybe it's more user adoption subscriptions or something like that. So what we recommend is sort of keeping it to two more in addition to the two financial metrics that you have. Okay. So I just tried to kind of give you a couple of snapshots of examples of our tools that we have. So we have a framework called Value Lens, which allows us to model our business cases. So the tool allows you to put in your cost assumptions, put in your value metrics. Like I said, we force everybody to think about it in the exact same way. So it's always revenue, cost, probability of success, and transformation metrics. And then we're able to very quickly the tool will give them a recommendation. It'll tell them, is this a good business case or a bad business case? There's narratives, and it's a lot easier to do these things now with all of the generative AI, where you can coach your team to be able to understand when they come ask you for money, be able to know if you're going to say yes or no very quickly because you've taught them how to think about it and coach them through it. So that's sort of our approach that we're trying to take here at Sanofi. So maybe to kind of wrap it up before we get into Q&A, I'll leave you kind of with three takeaways. The first one is revisit your hurdle rates because the context changes. Unit costs continue to go down, and so what didn't make sense a year ago probably makes a lot more sense now. Also, continue to watch what's the context of your business. If you need to focus on one metric or another, just use that to flex how you look at business cases. Don't be so rigid about it because everything is changing so quickly, and you just have to be able to adapt to that. The second one is focus on the behavior. What's important with these things is helping people understand that they should make decisions based on what's going to be the most valuable, reinforcing that behavior so that they know that that's what you expect, teaching them how to think about value, Don't get too worried about like the technicalities of it. I mean, of course, it depends on the line of business you're in, but if you're trying to do this across the enterprise, you're going to have a lot of generalists that have to understand the behaviors, understand the basic concepts. So focus on that over being rigid with the process. And then the last thing is keep it simple, because if you make it too complicated, then you're going to lose the majority of the people, and you can't actually enforce these value-based approaches and instill them into your ways of working. And be patient. It takes time. Like the first time we introduced this concept, it was maybe 2.5 years ago. And I would say we're just finally now, everybody knows and is starting to use the same language. So it's taken us 2 years globally to get there. These things take time. You just don't give up. Like, don't start, and after 6 months, if you're not seeing change happen, assume you're failing. Like, you just have to keep at it and be persistent. All right. I think this is sort of it from a content perspective. We have quite a bit of time, so we got 15 minutes to take questions and have a discussion.
All right, we have one question there.
Thanks very much. That was great. Your process of making a decision in a sequential fashion and each time revisiting that chance of failure or success reminds me of what's called a multi-armed bandit problem. Was this in any way an inspiration for the model that you've chosen here? And then I guess, since that's probably going to be a very short answer, can you talk a little bit more about how you come up with that probability in each step? Because I think it would be really valuable to understand. Obviously, this is an imperfect number, it's a guess. How can we sort of try and pad that number to be as close to accurate as possible, and where can we learn from that? Yeah.
Specifically on the POS?
Yeah, probability of success or failure, yeah.
Yeah. For us, that's a metric that is industry standard. So like every pharma company, when you look at drug development, you have to go through different phases. You have clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And these trials are standard. It's what you have to do to be able to get FDA approval. And there's tons of data around success rates. So we know, for example, how our competitors do in each of these phases and how we do against it. We know what are the drivers that affect it. So I can't, there's nothing unique about what the model I showed here. It is basically a model that exists. We just happen to really just take it and embed it into how we make decisions. So that's really, I wouldn't even say necessarily unique, but that's like what we've done really well, is make everybody think about it that way. But the actual data and the actual approach is just a standard industry approach. Does that answer both your questions? No, they'll have different. Yeah, so every single molecule will have a different profile, and we will have across a portfolio of molecules a different ratio that we expect. Yeah, and as you do more, those ratios will change. But the overall approach of measuring those ratios is what is consistent across. Does that make sense? So, for example, oncology typically has a lot lower probabilities of success. It's a lot harder to produce like a new oncology drug. It's just in general, that's just fact.
Maybe reflect on on the kiss and be patient pillar, because I think is that something that you kind of recognize halfway through this evolution? Because I commend you for where you're at as an organization. That's very good, right? And I think that's where we're kind of saying we have to start scaling things back, keeping it more simple. We try to almost bit not avoid chew. Or was that kind of your approach
Generally speaking, we've simplified, but even when we thought it was simple, we had to go back and even simplify it further. So I've definitely we've learned this along the way, that you got to keep stripping it back to the basics. And when you think you're done, you probably are not, and you should take another look. So just start with as simple as you can and continue to strip it back. It would be my advice. As soon as you add more things, you just lose people. And J&J, like us, you have 100,000 people, and if they have to learn how to think about these things, you have to keep it simple so that you can get the adoption, really.
Thank you. I'm intrigued by the business case tool that you showed at the end. Clarifying question and then open-ended. Wondering if there's an AI component to that or if it's more of a kind of simple calculator. And then the question about it, for large business investments, multi-year, multi-million, billion-dollar, totally see. But what's the smallest level of business decision that you're using this kind of standardized business case for? I'm asking in the context of trying to empower team members to take more business-driven decisions constantly. So I'm curious, what's kind of the smallest level of decision-making you do with that type of standardized approach?
Yeah. To answer your first question, we're starting to embed AI components into it. It's a lot easier and a lot more accessible. And what I think, to me, it kind of replaces a lot of the training, formal training or formal education that you normally would have had to do for people to really understand what's a good or bad decision. You can literally instantly give them feedback on their ideas. It's really easy to be able to build these things now. So there's tons of ways to do it, on the cheap. So in my mind, I think AI can really help people understand what is a good decision and why, so that when they come ask you for money, they can have something like this at their fingertips, and they can be like, okay, if I go ask my boss for this much money and it's going to be, my metrics are going to look red, it's probably a bad idea. How can I improve my ask, right? So I think it just allows them to do that process of self-refining and come back with better ideas. And I think that's probably the most valuable piece, and I think that's where AI can help. On the second part of your question, it was around empowerment. So I would argue that for really significant business cases, we probably put more effort into it, and sometimes this type of tool is not best for it, right? So when it's an M&A decision or something like that, it's a bit more complicated than just a couple of levers. So I'd argue those mega business cases, we tend to put a bit more effort into them. We still record them in the same, they still end up boiling down to the 4 metrics, and we end up putting the numbers there and tracking against them that way. But we might start with a bit more complicated model for a good reason. So I'd argue this is what you should use across all teams, because it's the same message. It's about being value driven, and I think you can apply it across. For us, we expect it at the product level. So we don't make you do it for every little idea you have, but at the product level, all your ideas have to be incorporated into into a rolled up version. You can break it up into 100 small business cases, or you can do one big one. We leave it up to you.
Anybody else has a question? We have 6 minutes. If not, I do have a question. So maybe I'll go ahead and ask. Can we go back to that dashboard that you showed? And yes, so basically, my understanding is from hype to impact, measuring the value of data is, being quicker at identifying and deploying or producing molecules, and also having a risk assessment of how much gains will the company get out of it. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Can you repeat your question?
So I just wanted to understand that the dashboard's goal. So is that a goal that the team would be presented to executives in order to say, hey, we have that molecule, and this is the efficiency, and we were able to create it in a much faster speed, and this is how much money is going to get us. Is that
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, so the approach is meant to be, we use it for all of our digital investments. So think of any AI or data or digital investments you're making. We want people to think about the value it's going to bring to Sanofi.
Right.
And the tool here is primarily used, one, for them to be able to refine their idea and submit something that is going to make sense.
Right.
And then two, executives and our CFO would look at expect those business cases to be positive for them to proceed. Right. So we use this.
It's the balance of the two. It's the balance of the two together.
Yeah, I think it goes both ways. So it's one, how do you train people to come up with better ideas that are viable from a business perspective? And then, so then you're basically, every business case that's being submitted is a better one because people are getting that coaching that this is a bad idea, you should improve it before they even come to you. And then when they come, you pick the best ones based on this approach.
Got you. Thank you. I understood. Other questions? Yes.
What is? Mm-hmm. So first part of your questions are on ownership. So data ownership is always with the business. So R&D owns their own R&D data. M&S owns their own site and manufacturing data. So that's how we run our data governance program. We're very much focused right now on what we call AI readiness. So how we get all of our data to be AI ready, which means it's clean, it's cataloged, we know where it is, and we have a centralized data strategy where all of our data is in one place, and we're able to basically, doesn't matter what AI use case we have, I can access all of the data that is available to me based on my permissions, et cetera. And the data requirements for that use case. So it's really easy to be able to get data from different parts that you need that is high quality. Yeah, I mean, a couple of important success factors. One is actually having diverse pods. So like all of our major products are always, we strive to have them all staffed by, both the scientists as well as the digital people working together. They have different roles, of course, but they both work on the same pod. So that's best practice. It's hard to apply, a classic robot across every single product. Sometimes you have to move so quickly and you can't get everybody all around the table, but where possible, making more and more of those pods working in a cross-functional way.
Right, 45 seconds left for one quick question. We are good. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I just have one last question to you is in Sanofi, for somebody who's in software or data scientist or tech, do the requirement of, is the employment required some medical background or, okay, yeah, it can be separate. Okay.
No, I came
Yeah.
from oil and gas
Like
and utilities.
other industries. Got you. Thank you. Just curious.
Oh, it depends on the job, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was just curious. Thank you so much. Thank
Yeah,
you
of
so
course.
much. Thank you so much for the great presentation.